All right, so today's virtual community event is a ask us, ask me anything about Agile. We have a host of Agile consultants here from AgileThought. And so I have myself, Quincy Jordan, Principal Transformation Consultant, Andrea Floyd, Transformation Consultant, Sam Facco, Senior Agile Coach, Dan Newman, Senior Agile Coach, and Mike Geiler, Agile Consultant. So today's forum, again, the AMA about Agile. So this is the way the conversation will flow. You ask questions, we do our best to answer. You ask more questions, we do our best to answer again. And we'll repeat that cycle over and over until you're satisfied or until we run out of time. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Sounds like a plan.
So let's get started. All right. Yes, Alana. I think it's the first hand I saw anyway.
Yeah, I'll try to turn my video on while I'm asking the question. So I work in big, well, relatively big financial organization, and we're going through agile transformation. I see the pattern. I see the pattern around the industries. It's usually for big companies, agile transformation starts from like pilot project on one team, and it's going fine. Everybody's excited. Then more teams or departments on board. There is a transformation roadmap. What I see most challenging is changing how organizations view budgeting approach. So my question is around, how do you promote changing mindset from projects to products and financing product and value stream development? Because this is a huge blocker for transformation and success of teams if organizations continue to focus on project and financing projects for a year.
Sure. All right. Good question. Who wants to take it? I'm good with taking it. Or okay.
I'll
Andrea.
take a first stab. Alana, I'm actually working with the client right now, and we're in that discussion phase. They too are doing an agile journey, and with our guidance, we've decided to pilot with a few teams, and then open up through success further opportunities for radiating out, including looking at the budgeting. However, the reality that happens is that there's appetite immediately once they start to see or they're struggling with real world problems of budgeting from a project-based standpoint. So the warning signs are that you've got to be mindful of when you have this conversation. And I've tried to have it, because the appetite is there, earlier than it was probably able to be heard and understood. It was a complexity that they weren't yet open to understanding. So my lessons learned from that is to shift back and really get them to understand a shift from project to product, because that's step one. If I can get them to make that shift and organize teams and work around product or value stream, I stand up to then take it to the next step, which is to open up the conversation around how do you make investments, so it's an incremental path forward. So I would just say, as a real world learning experience, is be mindful of when you introduce that topic. Make sure that they have some fundamentals before opening up that dialogue.
What was wasn't there, I don't know, one of those sensei things, like when the student is ready, the master will emerge? That's what came to mind when you were saying that, Andrea. Like, just maybe not forcing it as much as maybe one would want to hurry it along, because it is valuable, but maybe just waiting for the timing to be right.
And when you do it too soon, I'm going to tell you, the spin and the confusion that comes from that distracts from what you're really trying to do, which is make that shift from project to product.
When
Yeah.
when you get to that right time, you may also begin to consider helping them visualize how long that budgeting process is taking them and how that's actually impacting the performance of their teams and the ability to realize value. So that might help them go, oh, I'm beginning to see that, you know, our budgeting process takes 18 months, for example, to get a project into the pipeline. Well, that's 18 months I'm waiting to get that value to my customer. And then maybe you can begin to have conversations around, well, there's a better way or a different way that might reduce this. And now they're maybe thinking around, okay, there's a different way that might add more value to us.
The other thing that I was going to add too is you also want to recognize that there's a difference between if it's a publicly traded company versus a non-publicly traded company. Because if it's a publicly traded company, then they also have quarterly earnings and so forth that they have to share out, and that drives a lot of their budget cycle and how they allocate funds and how value-driven development is going to be restricted by. Now, does it have to be that way? No, it doesn't have to be that way. But in order for that to happen, then you have to have a leadership that's willing to basically go to their shareholders and say, hey, we're going to be focused on being value driven, not focus on shareholder driven. So, and I completely agree with everything that everyone else has shared as well. But I just wanted to point that out because sometimes we don't really consider that part, and we just want to say, okay, well, we're doing this agile thing and this is how it works. But you know, the shareholders don't care anything about that. And so we have to recognize that that parameter is there and then help it all to work together in the value-driven way.
What you were saying, Quincy, reminded me of the gentleman Bjarte Bogsnes who did the he did a keynote. Beyond Budgeting is what he's known for, and there was a big he wrote a book on that, and they're a very large multinational petroleum company, and there's a bunch in there about their practices of going from a traditional budgeting to a more nimble, more agile way of budgeting. That might be a nice deep dive if you're really looking to, or if anybody on his call is looking to kind of go deeper on that topic.
Dan, could you drop that title in the comments or the chat? And that.
You betcha.
Hey, Alana, if you keep dropping, you may want to kill your video. We understand if that helps.
I'll try to do that.
All right. Who's next? What's the next question? Surely you have questions. You joined the AMA session. So have others, go ahead.
Hello? Hi, can you hear me, guys? Hello?
Yes.
Hi. Well, I have a question for you because I basically always work with waterfall, like a traditional project management. And of course, opening with these new management procedures and agile, I still have a few questions, like how to control the budget and control all the changes control. Of course, the methodology and all the apps and everything is different, but I'm still don't see it as clear. So based on term how to control the scope and the budget, when you change, when we try to change in a company from the traditional waterfall to agile, applied agile. So I know that's depend of each company, it depends on the policies and what is better for them, but it's really challenging. So what do you think is the best to consider when you try to change? Sorry, kind of similar to the question of Alona.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Nancy.
I want to jump in on something I heard. There was the idea of controlling scope, and I think this is a direct carryover from waterfall. Is an idea that we can still or should still control scope. especially in Scrum, which is a tool for opportunistic discovery of what you actually need to build. The idea is less to control scope than to understand enough of what you need to build to get moving forward, and let scope emerge over time until you, so that you're building the right thing, the emergent ideas, rather than trying to plan your scope up front and then control for that scope.
To build off of that, it seems like Quincy and we always jump in at the same time. Sorry, Quincy.
No, I was actually, I saw that you were trying to jump in earlier, so I was just giving you the floor.
So to build off of what Sam has said, is so spot on. And also in the Scrum world, or Agile in general, that delivering the highest value things first allow you to, when you start to get close to what you consider is, the end of your budget or the end of some great plan that you put together, you've already delivered the vast majority of what the users really need. So when you're there at that end and it's crunch time, it's the stuff that they probably can live without anyways. So it's sort of the best of both worlds, if you will. You can discover what they need, and you're delivering exactly the highest value things early.
I do think there's something, and so agreeing with Sam and Mike, but maybe take a little different perspective on it. I think there is something to be said for shipping early, and I don't know, in a way that does become a control scope. Like, how do you get something that is not all the bells and whistles, yet is still something your customers are going to love when they get it? And sometimes as a product manager, holding your nose and shipping something so that people can start getting value, like you were saying, Mike, with some of those the value delivery cycles. And so that's like, if I put on my thinking hat about that type of controlling scope, it's important to not let this thing just grow and grow and grow without capturing some of the value that you're trying to deliver.
I totally agree with you, Dan. And you made me think of something else, that a lot of times the idea that we can or should generate a lot of scope up front comes from this fear that if I don't ask for it, I'll never get it.
Yeah.
Or it'll take forever to get it. Whereas if we
that's what's happened.
Right. But if we are delivering
that show.
if we're frequently delivering, then there's a lot less fear that, I'll never get my thing. I won't get my thing right now, but I might get it. And I don't have to ask for all the stuff. I can wait for it. So that is another way of controlling scope, is exactly as you said, to release early and often. So that builds trust with people who might fear that, well, I have to ask for the moon or else I won't get any of it. That I can ask for the thing I need right now, and get what I need right now.
And
So I think that kind of brings up a...
We did it again. It's your turn, Quincy.
This is Elena, if I can add to it. What's interesting to me, and this happened in my organization as well, that we ask questions about controlling scope, schedule, and budget from project manager perspective, because this is what how success is defined, that you deliver scope in time on budget. But when you do shift the mindset to value delivery, the organization shifts mindset around business goals. So your main driver for the year, regardless of how you plan project or product value stream, is main driver is business objective and business goal. And you focused on business goal, and you again, a scope might be emergent, but the main thing, it is important that this scope driven by this business goal. So it's not that important if you deliver 10 features or 5 features within a year, as long as they meet the business objective. Maybe you can reach the same business objective by delivering less or faster or within the budget.
I think you made an interesting point there, Alana, and something that I heard in what you were saying was also how are people being incentivized? Because that really affects what part of the scope that people are going to focus on. And so if they feel that, well, we're incentivized to deliver these features because the budget is dictating these features, and not because it's really dictating, and not because it's being value driven, but because, well, this is what the budget said that we could cover, then people are going to be incentivized to do that. And it's, I'm thinking about a particular client some time ago where we went in to do a transformation, and at the point that we started was just after they had set their annual goals for the departments, for the team members, and so forth. And so as things went along throughout that year, the transformation was going really, really well. And then we hit October, and literally when I walked into the building, I could feel a difference in the air. Like I could actually, the vibe was very different. And it took me a couple of days before I figured out what was happening. And then someone, told me, and it may have been November, but someone told me and said, hey, look, actually all of the directors are trying to meet their annual goals. And it completely shifted from almost everything that they were learning over that whole year to trying to meet this checklist. So that they could get their bonuses, because they weren't going to get their bonuses if they didn't meet this checklist. And the checklist had nothing to do with being providing value whatsoever. It was just a checklist of things from the end of the previous year, basically. And so how people are incentivized, is really important. And when people think about, well, how do we really get this agile ecosystem, this agile environment really going, it's not actually a quick process. Not when you're looking at true business agility. It's generally actually really a multi-year process. And it's partly for those reasons, because you have to make it through the change in mindset from that annual cycle. You have to make it through from how people are being incentivized. You have to make it through all of that stuff for people to really kind of get a full reset on a totally new way of thinking in a totally new environment. And you have to get the leadership on the same page with that and encourage those things. So I forgot exactly what it was that you had said, Alana, but it was something that you said that kind of sparked that for me.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, Quincy, it occurred to me, incentivizing people, like it's a little euphemism. Maybe we should just call it what it is, which is how people are being manipulated. Like until you change how companies are trying to manipulate behavior by dangling a little bit of money in front of them, lots of luck. Like, because there's always an unintended consequence to that. So yeah, beware the incentivizing, because you're going to get a bunch of crap you didn't really want as part of that.
Yeah,
but that takes time to change.
It does, and it's interesting because studies show that people are most incentivized by non-financial things in terms of like what they really feel rewarding. Like people, not as far as like they won't do their job, but they'll go over and above, and that's usually for reasons that have nothing to do with finances, at all, or compensation.
Mm-hmm.
Good. All right. Good dialogue, good questions. So I see we had Daisy to join and Levi. Welcome. Do you all have any burning questions that you're bringing to the table or that you had in mind before joining? Or anyone else?
Your hands up, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, if nobody else, I have interesting question on completely another topic, moving away from finance and project. We have a big agile community within the organization. There are a lot of Scrum Masters and project managers. We have our own coaches and coaching community. And one of the interesting things that I see happening as coaches driving agile transformation, of course, business and their managers and top management wants to hear how is it going. So they are coming up with some metrics, agile indexes, agile assessments for teams, organizations, departments. So I'm just interested, as working with organizations, have you been asked to do something similar, and what did you do?
All right. I actually didn't follow the question, so I don't know if someone else can take it, or if you wouldn't mind restating it, Alana.
Yeah, if I can restate the question, have you been asked to measure agile transformation, agility, success, especially when you are working with transform part of the, or as transform part of the business?
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Anyone want to jump in?
So what does success look like, and how do you measure it, and how do you report it? And hopefully the desires of the managers who want to know are informed desires, and then their help will actually be helpful. Yeah, especially if they're incented or manipulated to hit certain numbers, like numbers of launched teams this year. Right? Sorry, I mean, we need some controversy here. We got to start with something. Well, because if your goal is to launch 12 Agile teams this year, be damned if you're not ready for them. They're still going to launch them, whether they're getting the support they need, whether they're ready organizationally, whether they're structured and staffed and have compelling goals. So I do like the transparency. So there's one of our PSTs on the professional Scrum trainers on call, Sam, right? Transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So you do want transparency, but you don't want it done in a way that is going to cause downside. So yeah, that's a tricky question.
I think
what?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sam. No, you were going to add
Andrew.
on to. I was just going to go in slightly different. It's a great question. And I think each organization comes to the table with different expectations and what good looks like to them when they're embarking on an agile journey or transformation. If you can, ideally, a great opportunity is to maybe have an objective and some key results around the agile journey, and to work with that leadership team to help determine what measures would be good indicators for them to know how it's going. That's an opportunity to have that as an upfront activity, so that if you're going to embark on it, you understand what it may take in terms of investment and commitment to get there, and then have a good, deep conversation around how are we going to demonstrate that we're hitting our mark, and what does that mean to you? Because I want to know what success looks like to you, leaders, right? And coupling that with, I'm a fan of assessments. We go in, we do a baseline. It's a great opportunity to see where you're at, and then look for where do you need to focus, where do you need to shift, and then to revisit that and check in, quarterly or whatever cadence makes sense. But, and there's different types of assessments you can do. And then coming up with action plans around what you see, that's an opportunity to get clarity around, here's where we see a need for focus, is this, and here's what we think the outcomes can be if we focus in this area. So leveraging assessments to help guide that progression.
Mm-hmm.
So before I was lucky enough to come to AgileThought, I was at a very large financial institution that absolutely bought into this whole, we can do an agile assessment thing across the worldwide organization. And they thought it was very, very important to the extent that they set metrics, i.e. 30% of the organization will be agile by X, 50%, 85%. And what they got was exactly what they measured. They put it into their performance process, and teams immediately began checking boxes because their managing director went to the executive director, which went to the vice president. You will check these boxes. And so they were reporting globally how agile they were. And yet, if anybody that looked behind the curtain, you quickly discovered that they're anything but agile. It became a check the box exercise. There's a great book out there called Measure What Matters. And in there, it does talk about the fact that what you measure, you'll get. So be very, very careful what you're measuring, because the teams will get that box checked. Whether it's actually what you want to achieve is a completely different thing. So if you're going to pick measures that are trailing indicators that lead you to believe that the changes you've made are actually positive. So for example, NPS score. So is my customer really happy with what I'm doing? I make a change, I see what my NPS score says, as opposed to I want to drive my NPS score up by 2 basis points, because you'll find a way to do that.
Yeah, I think I want to jump on that as well. And something Andrea said, finding out what matters to you. And a lot of times I see companies focusing on that. Oh, we want to be agile, but why? What is it you're trying to do? What are you trying to achieve with that? Because sometimes it's we want to be agile because we've heard agile means we get everything faster, and that's not true. But what value are you providing? So I want to see what metrics around the current value of the products we deliver. What metrics are you using for that? What metrics are you using to measure time to market and ability to innovate? So go deeper, I think is what I'm saying. Go deeper than just, we want to be agile because we think it'll be faster, or even the happiest version of that. We want to be agile because we want happy employees. Great. Why? Because if all of your employees are really happy, but you're delivering not great stuff to the market, that in the long run is not good for your company or the long-term happiness of those employees.
Yeah, just to add on to that, what I've been hearing is a shift in from output to outcome, like why, the why behind it. And I think that's, if you can get a shift in thinking to focus on that rather than something that can incentivize behavior that you're not really seeking to have achieved, that's it. That's a great first, second, and third step.
Thank you.
I think it's also, so as everyone was chiming in, and I was thinking things very similar, but I wanted to add, I think it's also important to consider that the transformation itself has a certain measure that it should have as well. So you're measuring, you want to measure, okay, our team's delivering, are we getting those things that we should get? But are people actually being transformed? Is the organization being transformed at the same time? And those are kind of two different things. You don't want the organization to transform just for the sake of transforming, but you also know if people don't transform, and when I say transform, the way that we'll often go into it and the way that I look at it is, as a transformation consultant, if when I leave or when I'm not there for some reason, if those who I am either coaching or consulting or guiding or what have you, if they make decisions in line with what I've been coaching them to do, but they're doing it on their own and it's for sound reasoning on their own, then to me, they're transformed. They're really in the process of really being transformed because they're thinking different, they're acting different, their decisions are now being different, and it's being different based on sound reasoning that is, established from things that we, talked about. So I do think it's important to keep a pulse on how is the transformation itself going and how is delivery going as well. All right, what else do we have?
I do have another question. If
Sure.
okay, I'm just new in the agile change and process, and I have a question. As you guys as a consultant, what is better to apply, the Jira or Scrum? So do is one app better than other, or is it depend on the company? How big is the company? What are your thoughts about it?
And so your question is,
It's like a
Jira versus Scrum?
versus Scrum, or we should use one app instead of another. Sorry, program or another, based on the size of the company. Or
Sure.
what do you think?
I'll let Dan, the tool man.
Oh, call me a tool. Thanks. I think it depends. Some companies fall in love with Jira for whatever reasons. Some are Microsoft shops and they're going to use Azure DevOps potentially, or you might be small enough that Trello boards are fine. Thank you. I used to say post-it notes, but it's really hard to do that in a distributed fashion. Although maybe Carl, I'm digging his background, he might have figured that out. But I, just pick what's going to work for you, and really try not to make the tool drive the process. So I've seen very nimble organizations use Jira. I've seen other organizations, not nimble, use Jira, and it's not the tool as much as it is how people are willing to use it, or follow agility, and whether it's sprints or flow based, whatever the case might be. But try not to have a tool that's going to inflict a different process on you. Yeah. I know somebody out there must have different.
Couldn't agree more.
Good. Let's fight over tools. Jira's better.
Well, I do think one of the things you said was like really important, which is don't allow the tool to really dictate things for you. Understand how the agile approach that you're using, be it Scrum or Kanban or XP or whatever the case, understand how that should actually work, what the intent of it, what the framework should look like. And then once you choose the tool, have the tool to fit that as much as possible versus the other way around. Because it's easy to get into that habit of saying, well, we can't do this and we can't do that because the tool won't do it, which doesn't mean it's not, it's the right thing to do. It's just that you have a limitation because of that tool.
Yeah. And
Carl,
I think there's another thing. Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know if Carl, he had put a comment out there. So did you want to jump in, Carl?
Well, yeah. And it goes down to one of the first values of the Agile Manifesto, which is individuals and interactions of the process and tools. So it's more about the people than it is about which tool you use. So the tools, I would say, would be secondary than what we need to do with the work that we need to deliver. One recommendation I would make would be, we had a hybrid set of tools in our organization. We were using Rally, we were using MS Teams, we were using Target Process, we were using Trello, we were using physical boards. And that made it very challenging when somebody would leave from one team to another and had to transition to that tool.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
On the same note, I want to add that takes the time to evaluate different tools, because different tools will have different configurations, integration capability, and if you're using set of the tools, one tool might be better just because it's integrates with everything that you're already using. And everyone has a free trial now, so you can take advantage of that and pilot assessments with different teams, or just engage different people into that. And what I learned from, high security organization, it will be also important if it's in cloud or on premises, what security features does it have, and that might be a part of evaluation consideration there as well.
Right. The last thought I maybe have on that, at least the last one I see coming, is that keep the tool use as lightweight as possible. So, you know, whether Jira is highly configurable, Azure DevOps is highly configurable. What you don't want to do is configure it to match exactly what you're doing in such a way that then it becomes hard to change the tool as you learn things and evolve your process, your methods, your approach. Because sometimes I see teams like, oh, well, shoot, we can't change because the tool, you know, is hard to change. And so they stick with a bad process because they baked it into a very flexible tool. So.
Yeah, you know, there was also something that kind of a concept that I heard underlining what Dan and Alana both said, which is something that we do a lot, which is meeting people where they are, meeting teams where they are, meeting organizations where they are. And some organizations, you know, when it comes to tools, they've been very agnostic or they have certain tendencies, and it's good to understand what those tendencies are, because then that can help you to figure out, okay, well, what tool might be the easiest, or I don't want to say the easiest, but the smoothest transition, you know, for this organization to go to. Maybe it doesn't have all the features that some other tool does, but then you have to weigh the pros and the cons. You know, if that transition is going to be a little easier with one tool versus the other because of the culture at that organization, then that's an important factor, because you can choose a tool that has, you know, does everything that you want, but if it's really not, if it's so different than how the culture has been, there's going to be such a culture shock with adopting that tool that it could be, you know, a big challenge to that transformation getting off the ground properly.
Oh, interesting. That does. So I'm going to ask you guys something. We'll see where we go. Is the culture shock though necessarily harmful or helpful? Does it? So because sometimes you want to shake the machine just because you need to jiggle it, right? It's a visible sign that we're doing something different. You know, we're not doing project web access anymore, even though maybe you could be agile at project web access. You know, we're using Jira, we're using version 1, we're making an investment, a very visible shift. So I don't know. What do you think about
Yeah, yeah. So
those totems,
I
if
think,
you will?
yeah, I think culture shock can be harmful. I think culture change can be helpful. And what I mean by that is, if it's such a shock to the culture that you find yourself or you find the transformation stuck in a place of resistance because it's too much, too fast, too strong, then you don't reach the goal, you know, at the same time. So I think that culture change is good, but that culture shock, I think sometimes it's just a little bit too much for people to absorb.
So a question to follow that up. So most of the organizations right now are using their IT departments and transitioning to agility. What about those non-IT departments and trying to use these tools? Because at IHG, we were using it for building hotel rooms. So a very technical tool wasn't coming over that easily for them. So we had to actually scale it down a little bit to make it more adjustable to the culture. Are you seeing that as part of what's going on with other businesses as they migrate into business agility?
So my current client, very large company, accountants, they actually adopted Azure DevOps. And they're using the Kanban boards and moving their work through. And they were initially resistant. It was a big change for them. But fast forward a few months and they're loving the darn thing. It's brought so much more visibility to what they're doing. And because they go cross value streams, being able to visualize those dependencies and move them across, and it's been a huge win for them.
You know, sometimes I think that the non-IT environments almost benefit more in some ways because they don't know so much of the IT side that sometimes they're a little bit more open to, okay, this is how it works. Okay, great, fine. All right, then I'll do that. As opposed to, you know, sometimes when people know too much, it's like, okay, I have to come completely prepared, like I'm going to court, you know, to win them over. So yeah, so I think sometimes, you know, in those non-IT environments, it's not, again, not easier, but a little bit better to get that adoption, you know, to happen. Once they really see the benefits of it, I think they don't question it quite as much.
Yeah, Quincy, I'd agree with that, right? It's that terminology. You're not overly complicating it with these long definitions and descriptions, right? You know, I think that's how for the folks that are in non-IT, I mean, I did it for my 8-year-old over the course of the last quarter. I did a Kanban board up on the wall. She ran with it and understood it. Mom, it's simple. You know, I put it here. This is what I have to do. This is what I'm doing. And then I get to move it over to done. Yay, less work I have to do for the rest of the week. I mean, a flippin' 8-year-old, come on, you know? I mean, it's all about breaking it down. I did it with my PTO board at the school, teaching them the concepts, but at an easy level. And they've taken it away and used it at the jobs that they're going to. You know, my husband utilizes the concepts within his engineering practice. Mm-hmm. It's a win-win, right? It simplifies things. You could see it in a big picture. I don't know. That's my take.
And I know, just to add on to that, is that Trello is popular, I found, with a lot of people, you know, and I've heard people plan their marriages using it. But similar to you, Tammy, I was working with some nonprofits, and they had some needs to organize around getting something accomplished, and it was actually 3 nonprofits trying to work together, and just went in and you know, helped them understand the value of Kanban. And we used Trello, and then they were able to actually meet virtually and stay engaged with who's doing what and what's in what spot in a very simple way. But now they've adopted it, and I'm hearing that they're using it in their personal lives. So it's simple, you know, keep it simple, right? That old premise, KISS.
Yes.
Simple, right? Silly.
Yeah.
Also, do the simplest thing that might work. And so Scrum might be overkill for certain things. And I'm gonna commit a heresy. Now, I'm a professional Scrum trainer. I think they can. Ken Schwaber may burst through the door and execute me on camera for saying this. Scrum is not necessarily agile if it is too much for what you're trying to accomplish.
Yep.
I love Scrum. I use Scrum for all sorts of things, but the idea that we will become agile by doing Scrum, maybe not so much.
Oh no, there's another topic.
Excellent
right?
point.
So, you know, are you really doing Scrum if you don't have all the values and the you know, of Scrum represented? You know, you can do the roles and the events and the artifacts. And I think of, was your scenario, Carl, people actually constructing hotel rooms or designing them or both?
Yes, actually, our process is we go from architecture design, interior design, hotel room layouts, lobbies, food and beverage, guest experience, you name it, it's part of our process.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And we actually do I guess you can call it a demo, a sprint demo. We actually have model rooms where we actually come up with models of the locations, of the specs and everything.
Cool.
It could be form core, it could be actually furniture and equipment. So yeah, it's a fun procce. That's on hold right now.
And so I'm itching to get back into hotel rooms. The thought that comes to mind is also then, how do you give the people doing the work enough support without it becoming another burden for them to do? You know, and I think, you know, that's enough about that.
And that's why a lot of the teams were using the board, because it was easy for them to deal with. But then we had some project managers, Scrum masters that like digital tools because they came from the IT environment, so they converted them.
Oh, so that makes me think, like, okay, so then the conversation maybe ought to be, is the tool for the PM and the Scrum Master, or is the tool for the team? And if it's for the PM, it's the wrong audience.
Definitely the wrong tool, too.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the wrong tool.
Right.
Because they want a different answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Can we pull
hello.
on that thread a little bit, Mike?
Hi.
I'm sorry.
So they want a different answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Sorry,
Nancy,
my question. Oh, sorry. Hello. Hi. My question was because I'm being like a project coordinator in construction and engineering mindset. You know, I'm coming for this so structured, and now we're trying to I'm coming, like I have been working for manufacturing, and we are, always looking for ways to which methodology we can use. Like, we should go to Agile, we should continue with waterfall, and this change, and it is hard to apply. And more if you're coming for an engineering mindset, and like that we are so structured. So you guys are the one who knows all. That's what was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would actually say, so if you're in construction, I would recommend, if you're doing very routine builds, so let's say the plans that you're building it is the same, pretty much all the time, it's just over and over, just different location, then I would recommend Kanban. It would be a really good approach to that. If you're doing builds that have some very custom components to it, so let's say you're building out an office building, but each lease space can be built out based on the tenant, then I would use Scrum, for that, because you have more changes and, and so forth coming. But both can be good and applied into manufacturing and specifically construction. But Kanban is, in my opinion, usually the way to go most of the time when it comes to that.
Jeff Sutherland, in his book, Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice as Much in Half the Time, describes renovating his kitchen and managing it as a Scrum project, and how it went really fast compared to his neighbor down the street who said, this is just stupid, I'm gonna do it the old way. And 6 months later, that dude didn't have a kitchen still.
All right, well, we are at 9:56 and we are right up on the time.
What times are you in?
Where are you?
Yeah, where?
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's in Hawaii. Look at the background.
Okay.
Phone, sorry. Yes, I am actually in California, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yes, you
Oh,
are.
okay.
Oh, that was funny. We are 3 minutes away from the hour. Does that work? Okay.
It does.
All right, so let me pull my screen back up.
Time's a made-up concept anyway.
All right. Yes, that's right. All right.
Oh, look who took Philosophy 101 in college.
It was on my fortune cookie.
All right, so for our next event, we have not actually decided when and what yet, so please stay tuned for an email that will come out, but you can also always go to the AgileThought library and look at past events in the meantime, but you should see something coming in your email within the next week or so as to when the next event will be. As things reopen, close, kind of reopen, kind of start closing. So it's causing some of availability and so forth as to like when is the best time to do things. So
Yeah. And actually,
Yes.
Quincy, that was going to be, maybe you can have this question for the next time. How are people approaching post-COVID-19? What's the plan? What's the strategy? What's the plan? Because like you said, reopenings are coming up. Everyone's looking at school. So our parents going to let the kids go to school? Or we have a hybrid approach? Our businesses reopening? We know that things in Atlanta are moving kind of scarce right now. We may open, we may not be open. We open, we're closing. So yeah.
good point, good suggestion. Well, thanks everyone so much. Thank our panelists for joining and thank our guests. We really appreciate the questions. And, for us, it's fun. It's kind of a break, in different ways for us as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice to
Have a
enjoy the
great
rest of
day.
your day.
Everyone have a good
Take
one.
care, guys.